Signore e signori, ladies and gentlemen, it's the opening night of a little opera called La Traviata that's been setting this town on fire. Word on the street is that when its illustrious composer, Giuseppe Verdi, arrived in Venice for rehearsals last February, he was plagued by premonitions of disaster. Maybe it's because Verdi heard gossipers saying that Fanny Salvini Donatelli, the 38-year-old lead soprano, is far too old to play Violetta, a young woman dying of tuberculosis. Perhaps Verdi's anxious because he heard the opera house has a history of getting a little too hot. Will Verdi's big night end in disaster? Let's find out. Oh, and who am I? Why, I'm the ghost of opera's past, present, and future. Look around you. The building that you are sitting in will become known as one of the most important bastions of 19th century opera in the world. Some people have started to believe that opera has lost its significance because it's less popular in Vienna, which is considered the opera capital of Europe. In the 18th and early 19th centuries, opera was seen as a dying art form. However, as Daniel Hartz points out, this is mostly because there is a tendency to
see everything, even opera, through the prism of Vienna. That opera seria, being out of fashion there, was out of fashion everywhere.
But in Venice, opera is thriving, even as social and political scenes in Venice and Italy are shaken up. La Fenice is one of the best indicators of that. Although its theatrical season only runs from the day after Christmas until late March, it attracts the best performers and musicians from all of Europe. Just take a look. This beautiful structure, covered in paintings and stuccos, was rebuilt in 1837 with state-of-the-art acoustics. Well, as state-of-the-art as they come these days. The auditorium is built in an elliptical shape, which was thought to be the ideal shape for an opera house. The human voice produces elliptical sound waves, so the elliptical theater was considered acoustically preferable. The Fenice seats almost 2,000 people in 5 gallery boxes as well as balconies. Then there is an orchestra pit, which seats up to 70 musicians and is positioned at the front of the stage. Remember when I said that this theater was rebuilt in 1837? That's because it burned down in 1836. In fact, this was the second time that the illustrious Venetian opera house burned to the ground. La Fenice has a long and dramatic history of fire and feuds. In 1774, the San Benedetto Theater, which was the precursor to the Fenice, burned down. It wasn't until 1792, almost 20 years later, that it reopened, because there were severe legal disputes between the Venier family, who owned the theater, and the company that managed it. Finally, it was reopened in a new location with a new name, La Fenice, which is Italian for the Phoenix. The name, the Phoenix, is ripe with meaning. The heavy political and religious nature of the bird is supported by the fact that the myth's origin is in ancient Egypt, where people used to worship a sunbird deity called Bennu. Additionally, whenever the phoenix arises in literature, it symbolizes something in the human world, not the animal world. Therefore, La Fenice is a fitting name for the opera house because it symbolizes rising from the ashes both literally and figuratively. Literally because of the fire, and figuratively because of the legal disputes that plagued its restoration. This new structure was designed by a Venetian named Gian Antonio Selva, the winner of a major competition to find the best architect to design the opera house. Tragically, La Fenice burned down again in 1836, but it was quickly rebuilt and reopened the following year.
Turn your face away from the garish light of day.
Oh, blazes, not again. Sorry, that's just my annoying friend, the Phantom of the Opera. He always tries to sabotage these shows. Oi, Phantom, get back to Paris where you belong. Speaking of Paris, let us talk about La Traviata, the opera we're about to see. Even though it's Italian, it's actually set in Paris. The opera is based on an 1848 novel by Alexandre Dumas called La Dame aux Camélias. Dumas turned it into a play in 1852. The plot is as follows. Marguerite, a beautiful Parisian courtesan, or Lady of the Night, enchants a wealthy gentleman named Armand, and she becomes his lover. But their relationship is doomed by society's intolerance, and Marguerite leaves Armand to save his reputation. They eventually reunite and confess their love for each other, but she runs away again. Soon, she dies a tragic death from tuberculosis, alone. When Verdi attended Dumas's play in Paris in 1852, he was deeply moved, partly because he was in a relationship at the time with an opera singer named Giuseppina Strepponi, who his family strongly disapproved of. He felt a personal connection to Marguerite's pain, and he set about putting the play to music. Et voilà! La Traviata was born with only minor tweaks. The main character's name changed from Marguerite to Violetta, Armand's name changed to Alfredo, and Violetta dies in Alfredo's arms instead of alone. However, the show was still set in Paris in the 1700s. La Traviata was set to premiere at La Fenice, where Verdi had already staged 3 productions, Ernani in 1843, Attila in 1845, and Rigoletto in 1851. After La Traviata, he will only stage one more at the Fenice, Simon Boccanegra in 1857. Starting with Ernani, Verdi worked closely with the Fenice's chief set designer, Giuseppe Bertoja, who was in charge of designing and supervising the drops and sceneries for all the shows. Verdi appears to have been very pleased with Bertoja's considerable dedication to style and subtlety in Ernani, because it inspired a creative collaboration that would go on for 14 years. Bertoja designed the scenery and costumes for the 1853 premiere of La Traviata, with designs that used color and realism to emphasize dramatic situations and moods. By the time La Traviata rolled around, Verdi was respected enough to merit all new scenery. But his early operas mostly consisted of generic scenery left over from earlier shows. His operas did not have completely new settings until I Lombardi alla prima crociata, which premiered in 1843, 10 years before La Traviata. The irony is that Verdi, who had become one of the world's most celebrated composers, was not originally deemed important enough to merit designing original costumes or sets for his operas. As Verdi recalled in his autobiography, the impresario, or manager, of the Teatro alla Scala, Bartolomeo Morelli, rebuffed him during production of Verdi's 1841 opera Nabucco. As Morelli said,
"We will give this Nabucco. However, you must consider that I will have very heavy expenses for the other new operas. I cannot have costumes or sets especially made for Nabucco. And I'll have to patch up as best I can the most suitable material I find in the storeroom."
Now we're at the premiere for La Traviata, and although Verdi may have earned some more respect, he is still full of doubt. As I mentioned before, Verdi is racked with premonitions of disaster. 'Tis a pity, but most of the singers performing in the premiere tonight are not very skilled or committed to the opera, and Verdi recognized this right away. The best singer by far is a woman named Fanny Salvini Donatelli, who is playing Violetta, but at 38 years old, she is considered too old to play the young, dying heroine. I do so hate to tell you this, but the performance tonight will be considered an utter failure. Verdi's uncertainties will turn out to be justified. The premiere will be widely criticized because of the singer's inadequacy. Tomorrow morning, Verdi will be devastated. He will write in a letter to his friend,
"La Traviata, last night, a failure. Was the fault mine or the singer's? Time will tell."
But do not despair, my dear opera lovers. Verdi will write something else tomorrow morning as well.
I do not think that the last word on La Traviata was uttered last night.
Verdi will still have a feeling that his work will one day be appreciated. He is exactly right. 1 year from now, La Traviata will reopen in Venice's Teatro dei Benedetti with much more skilled performers, and this time it will be a massive success. In fact, it will be considered a masterpiece. Its music is beautiful, especially Violetta's aria Sempre Libera, which translates to Always Free. Even more beloved than its music, however, is its plea for tolerance. Although opera has traditionally been associated with the social elite, many progressive and democratic Venetian thinkers used opera as a platform to call for change. The tragedy of Violetta's death and the romance at the heart of La Traviata will touch hearts for generations to come. Venetian opera is unconquerable. Like La Traviata and the mythical Phoenix, Venetian opera will triumph once again. And now, my friends, my time is up. In 3, 2, 1, enjoy the show.